Okay, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching this Happiness Aid live webinar, Zoom call, video call, whatever you would like to term it. I am absolutely, I've probably gushed enough over the phone and on Zoom prior to, but just stoked to have a gentleman of his caliber in our space, someone that we look up to in Graeme Cowan joining us. Thanks very much for jumping on, mate.
Lovely to be with you, Robbie.
Mate, I was saying before, this is definitely not your first rodeo, and you mentioned that you've done a fair bit of the webinar and the Zoom thing. The light is perfect over there. You've framed yourself as well. What's it been like the last few weeks for you in terms of your business and what you get up to now before we sort of rewind the clock?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. So, it came on us very, very quickly, and suddenly all my live events were cancelled. And, most of my work has been around keynote speaking and doing workshops and that sort of thing. And so that was cancelled. But luckily, I'd always done webinars along the way. And in literally the first week, I just had a call, and it was by the Australian Institute of Health and Safety, or some people that were organising something for them, and said, we've got something tomorrow. We've got a panel on there and we've got 1,000 people enrolled. Do you want to present? And not by myself. I was just one of the, I spoke for 20 minutes, but I had nothing prepared. But I thought, oh yeah, let's give it a shot. And so anyway, I got straight into it, and that just sort of roller coasted from there. And it was also, I guess, a bit about preparation as well, that I had done it before. I was familiar with the medium. But I think it will change things forever. I think that we will have a hybrid model now, for live and virtual presenting. And there's good things about that. There really is. So you can't ever replace the live event, but it's also really gratifying to see the response you can get from a webinar as well. This is way better than nothing for many people. And so I've been talking a lot about, self-care, how you build resilience for uncertainty and tough times. And I just feel it's a really needed message now. And so that really, really helps me as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the other benefit is, Graeme, you can't be late to a meeting if it's online, right? You can just chuck a shirt on and you're there. And I love that that you've sort of alluded to the notion that, there's almost no excuse now not to be connected. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing for people. Some people might feel obligated and the like, but from the positive side of things, it is awesome to be able to get online. And you mentioned the gratification that is in the online platform as well as the offline. What's been your highlight so far on a webinar before we do the proper thing and introduce you?
Yeah, well, I think what I found really cool is people taking photos of slides and just mentioning key points. And I guess as a speaker, you always hope that people take away key points. And so it's really interesting to see what they do take photos of and share, and the comments that they do make. And I've always been about how you turn knowledge into action. It's no good just knowing stuff. You actually have to do things differently. And when it prompts people to do things differently, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's two reasons I like live events or working in them is one, the instant feedback you get. But I also just noticed, as you said that as well, that it's even better when you can go back and look at that feedback for the rest of the week. It doesn't have to be just on a video replay. Mate, look, I'll do my sort of introduction that I've put together from my research, but feel free to add anything you think would give weight to any of these elements. But I know that you're a humble guy, so I'll lead out with you're an award-winning author. You've written, is it 4 books?
5 now.
5, my apologies. There we go. We're going to add that in. And you've had testimonials from people like Tony Blair, affording that book from actress Glenn Close, which is amazing to see people of that stature and that level getting involved in your writing. and so they should be, by the way, because the level of that writing is incredible. You help set the wheels in motion for the one of our greatest legacy charities, I think, in Australian history. And Are You OK? And you're there as a non-executive director on the board, and you're a powerful speaker on topics like suicide, mental health, the prevention of mental health challenges, and suicide as well. The obvious elements that are connected with that, with things like resilience and care within teams, and really passionate about something that I'm pretty much living and breathing at the moment, which is the element of workplace happiness. So is there anything else we can add to that? I doubt there'd be anything.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the things that you just mentioned, Robbie, are related. You know, everything's interconnected, and you know, if you work in a supportive and caring team, you know, you want to go to work, you know, you really do. And that makes work enjoyable. So I think that's the other element, is that it's all interconnected.
Yeah, and I love that. I think anything that you have passion for will have a common thread, right? So what you've done is taken the passion that came from a set of adversity that you were given in a way, and you've turned that into an opportunity. And I think that's fantastic to follow the journey along, as everybody has, if they've read your books or they've heard of you before. But for those that haven't, is there an element to Graeme Cowan that led to the writing of those books that people might not know in the public sphere? And I'm leading the witness a bit here, but what's the story behind everything I've just mentioned?
Yeah, well, it was really my own lived experience. I probably had 5 major episodes of depression in my life, but in 2000 I just went through a really horrendous version. It was, you know, lasted for 5 years. I was out of work for 5 years. Marriage broke down, went and had to live with my parents, and I really wouldn't have made it without them, quite frankly. They supported me when I couldn't support myself, and it was through that experience that I just knew, when Gavin Larkin approached me about this concept of Are You OK? And a conversation could change a life, that it was, that really had legs, because that had been my experience. And he tragically lost his father to suicide. And, you know, I made attempts on my life, but thankfully I lived to tell another day. And that's really what I'm passionate, like the team at Happiness Co. I think if you've gone through something like that, you know that it is temporary, but when you're going through it, it feels permanent, and that's why you do stupid stuff.
Absolutely.
So it was part of making sense of it, you know, writing my first book, recording those stories, and then sharing it. And it has evolved, you know. When I first started talking, and when my books came out, they got a lot of publicity, and so I got asked to go to lots of country areas. So I went to lots of country areas in Queensland and New South Wales and Victoria. And then I gradually started to try to go back into the corporate world, because that's where I'd spent all my time, really. And at that time, everyone was saying, "Oh, there's no problem around, you know, stress or depression or anxiety in our workplace. There's no issues." And this is going back probably 7 or 8 years. But as you know, the last probably 3 or 4 years, there's just been, for one thing, a knowledge of the cost of getting it wrong. And
absolutely.
And then also the dividend if you get it right and have the right culture, the right leadership, etc. So.
And when you talk about the cost, obviously that's definitely fiscal, but you're talking human capital and the way that we can, you know, I guess profit in a way by keeping people around, and not just people not taking their own life, but obviously staying on board in your team, and all the different KPIs, if you like, that might hit.
Yeah, I was involved in a great launch on a Navy ship, the largest frigate at Woolloomooloo in Sydney, the HMAS Adelaide.
Lovely part of the world.
Yeah, and there were 600 sailors there about to depart for the Middle East and leaving their loved ones for 3 months. And they asked us to do an Are You OK launch there, you know, and really to embrace this concept of Are You OK 365. You know, we need to do it every day of the year. And what really impressed me was Commodore Stephen Hughes, who oversees 19 ships and 4,700 people, he really said that, that we'd had an AUAK ambassador that talked about a tragedy of losing her husband to suicide. And he said, look, we don't want to ever lose anyone to the Navy family. But I want you to know this is also a capability issue, that, the Navy is nothing more than thousands of teams. And if one person on the team is compromised, the whole team's compromised, the whole ship's compromised. And it's also a risk mitigation issue that in the Navy, we're in the business of taking risks out as early as possible when it's, as best for us. And he said, so it is with mental health. We need to catch these things as early as possible, because that's when it's fast to turn around. So, that was an example of a leader who just really got it. And in literally 3 minutes, he just expressed it so well that it was, a social moral thing, but it was also a team capability and a risk reduction strategy. So I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think that that speaks volumes in our world, in the mental health space, because you want people to understand it, so they will spend the money. And when I say spend the money, that's investing in the preemptive and the preventative, because it costs a lot more. Both financially, but more in the space of losing people to illness and suicide than people probably realize, in terms of the if we can even put it in the terms of risk reward or return on investment, which it's great that people are thinking about it like that nowadays, though. I think that's fantastic. And you mentioned that there's some studies around it. PwC, I think it was $2.50 for every dollar you're spending in mental health in your business. And it comes under all those different facets you mentioned. You did mention as well Gavin Larkin. Just quickly on Are You OK? What was your involvement there, and how did you help put the wheels in motion?
Yeah, well, Gavin, as I mentioned, he tragically lost his father to suicide about it was really probably 15 years before Are You OK started, but he was having to explain to his son what happened to his grandfather, who his son didn't even know. And anyway, he was at a program called Landmark, and he just decided to do something about it. And originally he was going to do a documentary about the long-term impact and how it just carries on for generations. But for whatever reason, he couldn't quite get that up, and then decided to segue to this concept of Are You OK Day. And there was just a very, very small core team, but Gavin heard about me through my books, Back from the Brink, and he invited me to be an ambassador. And then when I heard about it, I said, mate, that's I'm all in. And so, I really worked, as we all did, really, really hard in that first year to get it off the ground, because we had no money or employees or anything, but we just really believed in the mission of it. And it is very gratifying to see how, it's just continued to grow in leaps and bounds, and we're in the process of expanding internationally. We're about to expand into Israel, and pretty closely with the US after that. So lots of good stuff happening.
Unbelievable, mate. And I think somewhere like the US, it would just, it will explode in terms of impact, and that's incredible to hear. What would be your best advice? You mentioned the sort of startup and the small business nature of something, of starting a movement. What's your best advice for someone out there who might be wanting to share their message, and maybe they feel a bit stifled by inexperience?
Yeah, I think you have to be ready for it, because if you've been through a tough time, it's a very emotional turmoil, and some people think they're ready, but sometimes they're not. And the reason they're not is, when they start to speak publicly, they often find it quite hard to take it together, because they've been through a very, very tough time. And so, I just would say that, don't feel you have to rush into it. Just know that, you must feel right in yourself, and to really latch on and to perfect telling a story. And one of the things that I really learned early on was that it's not so much my story, but how my story affects or makes other people think. And so you can talk about what happened to you, but then you need to have other people reflect on what that's been like for them, or if they've known someone that's been in that situation. So probably that's one of my biggest things, is because the stories is what makes it. And, you know, in that first year we had Gavin's story, and we also had my story. So he had, you know, profound regret of losing his father to suicide. I've attempted suicide, and so I had, you know, real relief that I didn't put my family through the same thing. And those stories do generate momentum and change. So that was a really important thing. I think the other thing, and this was really, I think, part of Gavin's brilliance, was, so he was an advertising guy. He was the CEO of an advertising agency. And that brand he came up with, you know, a conversation could change a life, and the yellow bubble, like, it hasn't changed, and it will probably never change. It was
incredible,
so
yeah,
memorable. And you know, if you see it on social media, on Insta or any of the other platforms, it just really, really stands out. And related to that, directly related to that, is the mission. You know, a conversation could change your life. And so if you have the stories, the brand, and the mission, you know, that's the trifecta, I think. And of course, having the right people behind it, but they're the core ingredients, I think, to really build some momentum.
Fantastic advice. And I think a person wanting to share their story and turn it into some strength would take a lot away from that. So I love that. And you mentioned your own story, and the storytelling is a massive part of everything to do with Are You OK? But I think as that has been the catalyst, lived experience is now the most, if not one of the most powerful elements to helping people through their own challenges. And it's not necessarily a recent phenomenon, but it's definitely increased in the last, you mentioned, 3 or 4 years. How powerful is lived experience, and what's the results that you see from now sharing your story and seeing stories shared?
When you share your story, it gives people permission to share their story. And for a long time, mental illness has been wrapped in stigma, and you know, and it happens every single time that I speak. And sometimes it's really direct, or someone, you know, speaking in the audience, but other times it can be afterwards. Someone will wait until everyone else drifts away and come up quietly and just sort of say, well, you know, I've been through that as well. And it gives people permission to share their story. And so that's what I really talk about. If, you know, stories can change attitudes, and they can change behaviors, and they can change cultures in organizations. And that's why I think they are critical. And it's not, I really believe that it's not all about woe is me. And I do believe that there's a real responsibility for all of us, no matter, you know, what stage we are, to take the action, you know, to practice self-care ourselves, and not to be a victim. You know, sure, we need to be cut slack at times, and I'm fully aware of that. But there's also an obligation that if we want to help, we have to be in good shape ourselves, and doing the right things, practicing the right rituals is central to that.
Well, that segues beautifully. It's like you've read my notes, Graeme. Segues beautifully into, you mentioned I actually work for ABC in a small role in commentary, but I love Richard Fidler. I love the Conversations Hour, and I listened to your interview a little while back, and you mentioned the 3 outcomes that you were looking for in life. So my question is, what are those 3 outcomes, and how did they and do they relate to your everyday story now?
Well, you have done some good research. That goes back a while now. but it is, you know, I talk about, you know, we should be striving for 3 outcomes. And the first of those is vitality. So that's our physical health, you know, getting the right exercise, the right rest, eating well. The second one is intimacy, or our emotional energy. So that's having the right people around us. And the longest wellbeing study ever done, the Harvard Grant study, shows that the best predictor of a long life, a healthy life, an affluent life, a long sex life, is having caring and supportive relationships around us. And the third element, prosperity, is our contribution health. And so that comes through sometimes our work or sometimes the charity work we do, you know, volunteer work at schools or sports or whatever. And so they're the trifecta, and it's vitality, intimacy, prosperity, which is VIP. And so what I say to people,
I've only just realized that, and I was listening to that interview. Is there something behind this? Is there an acronym? I love that.
so my message to everyone is you have to act like a VIP, and what that means is each day topping up each of those 3 glasses. So, you know, making sure you have time for a bit of a walk, and it only takes a half-hour walk. You know, time for a good friend, whether that's a direct walk or a phone call or social media or whatever, and then
Zoom call.
yeah, Zoom call. And prosperity is, you know, if I'm going to do one thing today that can make a really positive impact, what will that be? And so how will I schedule that in? And I just find that that's my natural top up thing. And actually one thing I'll mention now is that I have something or a diagnosis tool called the Self-Care Snapshot. And you can find that at my website, which is graemecowan.com.au/self-care. And on there is a diagnostic in each of those 3 categories. So the vitality, the intimacy, and the prosperity. And so it's a good way to sort of identify what is your emptiest glass. So I tend to think of it as, you know, your glass of water, and it's outside in the sun and it goes down, down, down. And so what's your emptiest glass? What do you need to focus on? Because we need all 3 filled up to be robust and resilient when things don't go well. It's having the right scaffolding around us to keep us in good shape.
Yeah, that sort of emotional infrastructure is so important. And we talk a lot at Happiness Co about the champagne tower, you know, fill up the top first, which is yourself, and everything will sort of flow. But that's a bit too fancy, I think, for the for the real world. Not many people know what a champagne tower is, and nor should they, because that's the over the top parties. Yeah, the VIP concept for me is incredibly important. You mentioned my favorite word, which is contribution. I mean, we aim to be a platform for contribution, and you mentioned that it was a big part of the way that you have healed your life and the way that you work on things day to day. Would that be your superpower if you could have one? Would it be contributing?
Something I think a lot about. It certainly was the path out of pain for me, and it did provide an incredible sense of purpose. And it is interesting that, you know, before, when I went through those really difficult times, you know, I was focusing on happiness. You know, why can't I be happier, or what do I need to do to be happier? But I actually think the pursuit of happiness is crap. I think, you know, and sorry to say that to Happiness Co.
No. I get what you're saying.
But what I mean by that.
Okay, I'll just take the side.
But what I mean by that is that, you know, if you do find a sense of purpose and you do follow that, happiness is the byproduct. And you know, I think there's you know, certainly with me, it was like trying to tick all these boxes to be in good shape. But when I actually found some way that I could contribute, that was, you know, quite transformative.
Well, I love that. And you did muck around about the brand, but we talk about that all the time around, you know, if you're not waking up every day wanting to contribute to someone else's life or make it better or add some value to it, what's the point? You know, you want to be using your time to its best effect. And I think that's why it's so powerful as a tool for mental health and well-being, because you do get that ability to see other people light up and be happy. And maybe that's the pursuit. It's the pursuit of everyone's happiness as a community rather than just your own, which is great. And that, again, leads to my question that I had at the top of my next page, which is what does happiness mean to you? It is so subjective, and it can be such a drag to think about how you reach that goal of happiness, in inverted commas. So what does it mean to you, Graeme Cowan?
Yeah, and as I said, I don't really actively pursue it anymore. Like it's not a goal, but I do like I have. So those 3 areas: the vitality, intimacy, prosperity is like your energy and that sort of thing. And then the purpose I have is helping leaders to build more caring and resilient teams who enjoy growing together. And so each week I have a planning sheet, and it's actually the planning sheet is on that that link that I mentioned before as
Brilliant.
well. So it's a weekly planning sheet, but I write that down every week, what is my purpose? And then plan, things I'm going to do in each of those three categories. And I don't so much think about, of course I have everyone has their ups and downs, and I have my ups and downs. But I think what I've discovered is if you do the right things, it does take you up the moodometer. And,
I love that. Yeah.
when you are at the top of the moodometer, what I call the green zone, you're more optimistic, you're more resourceful, you're more energetic, and you're more grateful. And all those things are wonderful for, emotional well-being. And that's the beauty. It's not saying that we don't go to the red zone or even the amber zone, because life happens and things happen all the time. But just knowing that there are things we can do that will help move us up again, sort of thing. That's a critical element.
Yeah, that's you're spot on. And it's funny, we for people that know Happiness Co well, who are watching this through the Happiness Aid platform, they'll know the traffic light system that we work in as well. We always have a difficult time explaining what part of that mental health spectrum we sit in. So we designed the green, the amber, the red, and saying that we sit in the preemptive green, or the green space around everyday choices, decisions, stories, and emotions. So I don't know if we come to work for you or you come for how it works. Maybe we combine, but we'd be good at it, I think. There was a mention in that same interview actually with Richard Feidler, and I'm hoping you do remember this, so I'm not putting you on the spot too much, but you mentioned a survey you did of around 300 people for one of your books.
Yeah.
What kind of results did you take away from that when it comes to happiness, well-being, mental health?
Yeah, well, it was actually, so in a subsequent book, I did a survey of 4,000 people. So that was my first book, where I did 300, then I did 4,000.
You were like, the sample size, come on, let's go. Let's step this up.
so it just upped it. But it was specifically, that one was around what helped best in bouncing back. And this was something that I'd really thought a lot about in terms, but as I said, I surveyed 4,000 people, and I wasn't looking for one magic bullet. I was really looking more for themes, and it ended up bringing up what I thought was a really great theme, and it was I care, which is an acronym. And so, this is what I talk about in the workplace. So the I is for identify, how you identify someone who's struggling. The C is for compassion, how you put yourself in their shoes, how you ask, are you okay? The A is for access experts, helping them find the right help, be that an exercise physiologist or a GP or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. The R is for revitalizing work, and not everyone knows that our recovery, and we are in bad shape. Actually, being connected to our workmates, being working, even though it may not be the full hours, is actually good for us. It's much better, for example, in most situations, than sitting at home staring at the wall. And the final E is for exercise. And, just getting 30 minutes brisk walk each day was really fundamental to my recovery. And all the people I've interviewed and, subsequent research I've done, it is just, a foundational thing for good mental health. And it's very, very hard for people to talk about separate physical health and mental health. They just have overlap so much. And, but yeah, they're the key things that I learned about bouncing back from the red zone, and staying in the green zone is just topping up, the VIP cups, and they're probably the two main areas.
People are getting some incredible takeaways and distinctions from this, and I wanted to sort of narrow in on one in particular thing. So obviously we're in a very weird time, and that's putting it very lightly and understating it. But is there a piece of advice that you have for people who are, and I love the way that you think about the carer a lot as well through your experiences. So whether they're caring for or living with someone going through some unhappiness or uncertainty at this time, what's your best advice for the person? Maybe not going through the issues, but maybe dealing with it, let's say, secondhand.
Yeah, well, I think, and we are often, especially the last 8 weeks, we've been often locked in the same place with that person,
Mhm.
or somewhere else. And so, I think just encouraging to get out for a walk is a huge thing. And the beauty about that, and especially if you can do it in a park or in nature, you're walking shoulder to shoulder, and it often makes it easier.
1.5 meters, of course. Yeah.
1.5 meters apart. But there is something about looking ahead and not looking face to face that does make it easier, and particularly for guys, to talk about what might be happening. And I always there's a particularly great video on the YouTube channel for Are You OK? And it's a real story between a boss called Tom and one of his teammates called Justin. And Justin was in a blokey industry, the railway industry, and Tom just knew that things weren't right with Justin, and he reached out and asked, and of course Justin said, "Yeah, no, I'm fine, no worries." But then Tom was quite quietly sort of spoken by, but he just kept on coming back. And then, Justin just said, I wasn't ready to speak the first time, the second time, or even the fourth time. But when you asked me the sixth time, I just knew I couldn't pretend anymore. I needed to. So I think that'd be the two main elements: is encouraging a walk each day, and don't be afraid to revisit it, because someone may not be ready to talk today, but they could be, in a few days or a period of time.
Yeah, we talk about the big FU, which is follow up. Making sure that people get that second and that third interaction without feeling a sense of guilt. Is that the best way to sort of put it?
Yeah, and you can't, as I say, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. But and just being, and I think just having that spirit of wanting to help and to care. And people often agonize about, saying the right things, wrong things, but people sense when, you're there because you want to be there and want to help. And don't be afraid to revisit it, because all the research shows that it's very rarely the first time that someone will open up, particularly a guy, but often 2, 3, and in Justin's case, 6 times. It happened after that, and that was a breakthrough moment.
And you'd rather feel that guilt about annoying someone than feel that guilt about not annoying them enough, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
It's always great to know that Are You OK? Have that conversational model as well, which I think is always great to follow, because when you're not confident at something, it's always nice to follow that model. And if you're not aware of that, make sure you head to the website. We'll put all these links that you've mentioned as well. I'll put some fancy graphics up and down the screen for everyone to have a look at right now. But is there a way that people can get in touch with you, Graeme? And in particular, what would they be coming to you for? Because you've got some incredible stuff that you do.
Yeah, well, I guess one of the probably the most active social media thing for me is LinkedIn. I'm pretty active very active on that, in fact. So that's a really good way to contact me, ask questions, etc. And what people are coming to me for is presentations, live presentations, workshops. But I also 2 years ago co-founded a new social enterprise called Factor C, where C is for care. And so I started it with a guy in Melbourne called Brendan Carter. And so we produced a lot of online learning which can be scaled in businesses, so that it can be personalized for that business, but then it's suddenly available to everyone. So it's a way to really accelerate knowledge across an organization. So that website is Factor C. C is for care, and .com.au. And you can see how we approach things there.
Brilliant. I love that. And I love everything about what you do. And I've got a couple of questions, real quick fire ones, and then I'm going to do some word association with you, mate. So
Okay.
Strap yourself in. We've done this with everyone. We've done it with Justin Langer and Ashton Agar and Brad Shepp and all the footy boys, and as well as some of the incredible ladies that we've had on the platform. So don't stress. It's not too crazy. And if you say the wrong thing, we can just beep it out. It's all good. What's your favorite quote of all time? I know it's a bit of a cliche slash corny one, but I think someone like yourself who's been through what they've been through will have some powerful motivational quotes behind them.
Yeah, one that I love is be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. And what I've learned in telling my story, you just never know what's going on in people's lives. And even the people who have the perfect life, the perfect house, the perfect marriage, you just don't know what goes on behind closed doors. So I think just having that spirit of kindness goes a long way.
Doesn't it what? And I think, we always talk about as well, I'm sure you'll love that. Just people want to be noticed and go around acting like everyone has a sign on their head saying, please notice me, and it can make a fundamental difference. During the times that you were having your episodes, as you call them before, and the bouts of depression and unhappiness, to bring it to the upside of things, what was the moment for you that you knew you had turned it around per se, or the moment you realized that you'd pushed through?
It was a very long battle back for me. It sort of involved exercise at first and then reaching out to family and friends. But I think it was really making that decision to write my first book. Because in that book, I interviewed 12 people and some well-known people as well as everyday people. And then suddenly it was working on something bigger than myself. And when you are mentally ill, you're very self-consumed. And so that was like the transition, I guess. And when I wasn't feeling great, well, it was not just about me. It was, on the potential impact it could have. So that was definitely a turning point.
That's powerful, mate. All right, word association time. Here we go. Now, this can go fantastically well, or depending on the words that I've chosen, it can go terribly. But that's on me. Okay, Graeme, that is on me. The first one. Now, the way this game works, according to the rules that I've made up this week, I will give you a word or two, and all I need from you is just a quick sentence in reply, or even just a word, depending on how you feel. Or you can just tell me to shut up. Doesn't matter. Social media.
You can have too much.
Yes, love that. Sport.
I love it. I've played it, enjoy watching it. I think it's great.
What's your sport of choice, just to go off track a bit?
It was rugby league. I played rugby league.
An Eastern side answer. Yes. And club of choice over there?
St. George, the Mighty Dragons.
Oh, nice one. Yeah, okay, red and white. The words mental health.
Everything. If you don't have mental health, you have nothing.
Fantastically put. Happiness.
Happiness is best shared.
Mate, you are nailing this game just quietly. Conferences.
Conferences. I think the wonderful thing about conferences is shared experiences, and that's the thing that we're battling to duplicate with virtual events. It goes somewhere along the lines, but it's not quite. So conferences to me are shared experiences, and they can be incredibly powerful if they're done well.
Yeah, I love that. And we were talking before, I think it was pre-record, but where you have to sort of see the positives in the online world, and there are plenty, but that face-to-face, as our CEO Julian puts it, belly button to belly button, which I think is a bit too close for conferences. It just has a different volume to it, doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
Gavin Larkin.
A very good mate, and just very, very sad to lose him. And it was only 2 years into Are You OK that he passed away. But it's credit to his vision, how he got people involved. That it's just gone on to bigger and better since. So yeah, he was a good mate.
Love that, and so it should have. Leadership.
I believe in the concept of servant leadership, and so that's really leaders working out how they can make their team better, how they can make individuals and their team better. And I think that is the future, where leaders are about creating something greater than themselves. Of course, there's always a role for guidance, mentoring, coaching, but I think that ultimately it is about making the individuals and the collective greater than, the individual leader.
So perfectly put. So perfectly put. And the last one, and you are allowed to be unhumble, if that's a word. You're allowed to go full out on this one. My last word association for you is Graeme Cowan.
Graeme Cowan. Yeah, I'm comfortable in my skin, and for a long time I wasn't, and I think when I wasn't well, I was trying to be two people, like someone in my personal life, someone in my work life, and now it's the same, and that's and if you're true to yourself, there's an Indian saying which I really love, and it's tension is who I think I should be, and happiness is who I am. Happiness is who, just as I am, sort of thing. So when we can be authentic, and we don't discover that straight away. Some of us don't. It took me a long time, but when we do and know the things that are important, that's real sustainable well-being.
Mate, absolute pleasure to share 40 odd minutes with you, and I wish it could be forever, because I think everything you have said has given me some great advice and some great tools and some great techniques. I'm sure the people who are on the platform and anyone who watches this in our Happiness Aid library will benefit off this for a long time to come. Keep doing amazing stuff, mate, and hopefully we can have you on again soon.
Thanks, Robbie. It's been a pleasure.